Layla Jackson had exactly 43 seconds to realize three things. The leather seat beneath her was worth more than her yearly salary. The men in tailored suits surrounding her weren't flight attendants, and the dark-eyed man studying her from across the cabin could end her life with a single nod. She'd boarded the wrong plane, and it was already 35,000 feet in the air. Welcome. You're about to join the exclusive club of subscribers who get the real stories. Non-subscribers? They only get the watered-down version. Don't be left out. Join the elite group now. Let's dive in. The fluorescent lights of Seoul General Hospital had burned Layla's retinas for 72 hours straight. 3 consecutive night shifts in the ICU had left her hands shaking, her scrubs stained with coffee and regret, and her mind operating on the kind of autopilot that makes you forget your own name. But she'd promised Megan. One weekend, Jeju Island. Cheap tickets, cheaper hotel, and the kind of beach that didn't care if you showed up looking half dead. Girl, if you missed this flight, I'm never forgiving you. Megan had texted 15 minutes ago, followed by approximately 73 airplane emojis. Layla's sneakers squeaked against the polished floor of Incheon International Airport as she ran, her backpack bouncing against her spine like a punishment. Her nursing badge still dangled from her neck. She'd forgotten to take it off. Again, the departures board blurred past her vision. Jeju, Busan, Tokyo, Jeju again. Gate 47. She had 6 minutes. Except exhaustion makes liars of even the most careful people. She turned left instead of right. Walked through a hallway that smelled like leather and silence instead of recycled air and instant ramen. The carpet beneath her feet was suddenly too soft, too expensive. But her brain, soaked in fatigue and desperation, didn't register the warning signs. When a man in a black suit glanced at her badge and nodded her through a frosted glass door, she assumed he was just being efficient. The jet was smaller than she expected. Intimate. The kind of space where you could hear someone breathing 3 rows back. Except there were no rows. Just cream-colored leather seats arranged like a living room, each one facing a center aisle. And men, 6 of them, maybe 7, all dressed identically in black suits that looked like they cost more than her student loans. They didn't look like tourists heading to Jeju. They looked like soldiers waiting for war. Layla froze halfway down the aisle, her backpack suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. One of the men stood, his hand moving toward his waistband in a gesture that made her stomach drop. Sit. The voice came from the back of the cabin. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The single word carried the kind of authority that made kingdoms fall and grown men weep. Layla's eyes snapped to the source. He sat alone in the rear section, separated from his men by an invisible wall of power. Mid-30s, maybe. Korean, with the kind of bone structure that fashion magazines would murder for and a gaze that could crack diamonds. His suit was black. His watch was platinum. His expression was carved from the same stone they used to build prisons. I said sit. His English was perfect, lightly accented, and cold enough to frost the windows. Layla's legs moved before her brain caught up. She collapsed into the nearest seat, her hands gripping the armrests like they were the only solid things left in the universe. The door sealed with a pressurized hiss. The engines roared to life. Wait, her voice cracked. Wait, I think I'm on a wrong, you think. The man leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes pinning her in place. Or I was supposed to go to Jeju. I'm meeting my friend. There's been a mistake. One of the suited men muttered something in rapid Korean. Another laughed, low and mean. The man in the back raised a single finger, and the laughter died like it had been shot. What's your name? He asked. Layla. Layla Jackson. I'm a nurse. I work at Seoul General. I can show you my ID. I can. You walked onto my plane, Layla Jackson. He said her name like he was testing it, tasting it. Past my security. Onto my aircraft. And you expect me to believe it was an accident. The jet began to move. Layla felt the ground slip away beneath her, felt her stomach lurch as they lifted into the sky. She was going to throw up, or cry, or both. I swear to God, I didn't know. I'm exhausted. I just finished 3 night shifts. I wasn't paying attention. Please, where are we even going? Paris. The word hit her like a slap. Paris? As in France. I'm not aware of another one. His tone was dry, clinical. He studied her the way a scientist might study a specimen. Curious, detached, and faintly annoyed. You're either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. I haven't decided which. I'm neither. I'm just tired. Layla's voice broke. She hated that it broke. She'd spent years building walls, learning to be strong, learning to survive in a world that didn't hand out second chances. And now she was crying on a private jet, surrounded by men who looked like they've buried bodies for a living. Please, I have a brother. Back home in Jersey. I send him money. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. The man's voice shifted just slightly. Still cold, but with the faintest edge of something else. Curiosity, maybe, or amusement. Not unless you give me a reason. One of his men spoke again in Korean, sharper this time. The man in the back responded without looking away from Layla, his tone dismissive. Then he switched back to English. My people think you're a spy, or a journalist, or monumentally foolish. He tilted his head. I think you're telling the truth. Exhaustion makes people careless. And you, his gaze traveled over her wrinkled scrubs, her scuffed sneakers, the hospital badge still hanging from her neck. You don't look like someone who planned this. I didn't. I swear. Then you'll sit quietly for the next 11 hours and cause no trouble. When we land in Paris, you'll be escorted to a hotel. You'll stay there until I decide what to do with you. He leaned back, dismissing her with a gesture. Touch nothing. Speak to no one. And pray I remain in a generous mood. Layla opened her mouth to argue, to beg, to do something. But the look in his eyes stopped her cold. This was not a man who negotiated. This was not a man who explained himself twice. This was a man who had probably killed people for less than boarding his plane uninvited. So she sat. She breathed. She watched Seoul disappear beneath the clouds and wondered if she'd ever see Megan again. If she'd ever see Malik again. If this was how her story ended. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a stupid, exhausted mistake at the wrong gate. The man in the back pulled out a laptop, his fingers moving across the keys with the efficiency of someone who'd built empires before breakfast. He didn't look at her again for the next 2 hours. But Layla felt his presence in every breath she took, in every heartbeat that reminded her she was still alive. For now. Now before I tell you what happens next, if you're enjoying this, subscribe for more. Trust me, you'll want to. So here's the thing. The silence on the jet was the kind that made you aware of your own heartbeat. Layla had counted hers approximately 4,000 times since takeoff. The men in black suits had stopped watching her like she was a threat and started ignoring her like furniture. But the man in the back, the one who'd commanded her to sit like she was a disobedient dog, he kept glancing up from his laptop, his dark eyes catching hers before she could look away. 2 hours into the flight, he closed the laptop with a soft click. Come here. It wasn't a request. Layla's legs trembled as she stood, her sneakers silent against the plush carpet as she made her way to the back. Up close, he was even more devastating. Sharp jawline, perfect skin, and an aura of controlled violence that made the air around him feel heavy. He gestured to the seat across from him. She sat. Tell me about your brother, he said. The question caught her off guard. What? You mentioned him. When you were panicking. His voice was softer now, almost conversational, almost human. You sent him money. What? That's none of your business. One dark eyebrow arched. You're on my plane. Everything about you is my business. Layla's hands clenched in her lap. She thought about refusing, thought about staying silent out of spite. But something in his gaze told her that honesty might be the only currency that mattered here. His name is Malik. He's 18. Our mom died when I was 23. Dad left when we were kids. So I raised him. The words came out flat, worn smooth by repetition. He's in college now. Rutgers. Pre-med. I work extra shifts to help cover what the scholarships don't. And you took a position in Seoul because the pay is better. International nursing exchange programs pay nearly double. 1 year here, and I can clear most of his tuition debt. The man was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You sacrifice your life for his future. That's what family does. No, his voice turned hard again, sharp as a blade. That's what good people do. Family disappoints you more often than strangers. There was something raw in that statement, something that suggested personal experience rather than philosophy. Layla found herself leaning forward slightly, curiosity overriding fear. Is that what happened to you? His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might tell her to go back to her seat, to shut up, to remember her place. Instead, he surprised her. My father built an empire. When I was 25, my younger brother tried to take it from him. He failed, but the betrayal killed my father faster than any bullet could have. His eyes went distant cold. I inherited a kingdom built on blood and a lesson I'll never forget. Trust no one. Not even the people who share your name. That's a lonely way to live, Layla whispered. Loneliness keeps you alive. He stood abruptly, towering over her. Get some rest. We land in 5 hours. And when we do, your real problems begin. He walked away before she could ask what he meant, leaving her alone with the weight of his words and the terrifying realization that maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous man she'd ever met was also the saddest. Paris greeted them with rain and the kind of gray morning light that made everything look like a film noir. Layla had slept exactly 0 minutes on the plane, her mind too wired with adrenaline and confusion. When they landed at a private airstrip outside the city, she expected to be shoved into a car and deposited at some budget hotel to wait out her fate. Instead, she was ushered into a black Mercedes SUV with bulletproof windows and seats that smelled like money and danger. The man, she still didn't know his name, sat beside her in silence. His men filled 2 additional vehicles, forming a convoy that moved through Parisian streets like a presidential motorcade. People stared. Some even stepped back instinctively, as if they could sense the violence these men carried in their bones. They didn't go to a hotel. They went to the Hotel Plaza Athénée, where doormen in pristine uniforms opened doors before they even stopped moving. Layla's wrinkled scrubs and hospital badge felt like a Halloween costume in a cathedral. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere near this world. Suite 12, the man said to someone in French, his accent flawless. Then to her, in English, stay close. The suite wasn't a suite. It was an apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Marble floors. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Layla stood in the center of the living room, her backpack still on her shoulders, feeling like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace. You're free to move around, he said, shrugging off his suit jacket. Beneath it, his shirt was crisp white, tailored perfectly to a frame that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. Order room service. Sleep. Whatever you need. And then what? Layla's voice was smaller than she wanted it to be. Then I decide if you're telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. Perhaps. He moved to the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey despite the early hour. But in my world, mistakes like yours don't happen accidentally. They happen because someone is careless, or because someone is clever enough to appear careless. Your world. Layla dropped her backpack, anger finally overriding fear. What world is that exactly? Because I'm pretty sure normal businessmen don't travel with armed guards and terrify nurses. His smile was razor thin. No, they don't. So what are you? Mafia? Cartel? Some kind of yes. The single word stopped her cold. He took a slow sip of whiskey, his dark eyes never leaving hers. My name is Jae-won Cho. I control the largest Korean syndicate in Asia. Politicians take my calls. Police look the other way. Enemies disappear. He set the glass down with a soft click. And you, Layla Jackson, walked onto my plane like you owned it. The room spun slightly. Layla gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. If you believe people deserve honesty and transparency, hit subscribe. Only manipulators and cowards hide the truth, she thought bitterly, remembering the motivational posts Megan always shared. I should be dead, she whispered. Yes, Jae-won agreed. You should be. Quick, comment where you're from. I want to see the map of listeners light up. All right, back to what happened next. The estate appeared 2 hours outside Paris, hidden behind iron gates and walls that looked like they could withstand a military siege. Layla had watched the city fade into countryside through the SUV's tinted windows, her stomach twisting tighter with each mile. Jae-won had barely spoken since his confession at the hotel. He made a single phone call in Korean, his voice low and commanding, then told her they were leaving. She hadn't argued. What would be the point? The mansion was ridiculous, all stone and history, and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Guards patrolled the perimeter, earpieces visible, weapons probably concealed. This wasn't a home. This was a fortress. Why are we here? Layla asked as they entered through massive wooden doors. Because in the city, you're a liability. J1 moved through the foyer like he owned it. He probably did. Here, you're protected. And so am I. Protected from what? He stopped, turning to face her fully. In the soft light filtering through stained glass windows, he looked almost vulnerable. Almost. 3 days ago, one of my lieutenants betrayed me. Sold information to a rival family in Busan. I've been conducting business in Paris while my people handle the situation back home. His jaw tightened. The war hasn't started yet, but it will. And when it does, anyone associated with me becomes a target. I'm not associated with you. I'm a mistake. Remember? You boarded my plane. You sat in my space. You breathed my air. Something dark flickered across his features. In my world, that's enough. Layla's hands trembled. So what? I'm a prisoner now. You're a guest. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. One I'm choosing to protect instead of eliminate. Don't make me regret that choice. He led her through hallways lined with art that probably cost more than most houses, finally stopping at a bedroom that overlooked rolling hills and vineyards. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Rest, Jaewon said from the doorway. We'll talk more at dinner. But Layla couldn't rest. She paced the room for an hour before venturing out, following voices to a study where she found Jaewon speaking rapid Korean into his phone. She caught fragments, words that sounded like names, like orders, like threats. When he ended the call and noticed her in the doorway, his expression didn't soften. You shouldn't be here. I heard you talking about someone named Min Jun. About making an example. Layla's voice was steadier than she felt. Is that the lieutenant who betrayed you? Jaewon's silence was confirmation enough. What are you going to do to him? What I always do to traitors. His eyes were empty, cold. Remove them. You mean kill him? I mean ensure no one ever betrays me again. He stood, closing the distance between them. This is who I am, Layla. This is the world you stumbled into. Blood, power, consequences. If you can't stomach it, tell me now. But she didn't look away, and something in his expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or something dangerously close to respect. Dinner was strange. Not because of the food, prepared by a private chef who worked in silence, but because Jaewon cooked alongside him. Rolled up his sleeves, chopped vegetables with the precision of someone who'd held knives for purposes far darker than cuisine, and actually smiled when Layla asked if Mafia bosses usually moonlighted as sous chefs. My grandmother taught me, he said, his hands moving efficiently through the prep work. She said a man who can't feed himself is a man who depends on others. Dependency is weakness. Your grandmother sounds intense. She survived the Korean War, raised 5 children alone, and built a restaurant empire from nothing. He plated the japchae with careful attention. She was the strongest person I've ever known, and the only one who never feared me. They ate on the terrace as the sun set over the French countryside, painting everything gold and amber. The guards maintained their perimeter, but at this distance, they were just shadows. For a moment, Layla could almost pretend this was normal. A vacation. A strange, impossible dream. Tell me something true, Jaewon said suddenly. What? Something no one else knows. Something real. He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. You know what I am. What I do. Give me something in return. Layla hesitated, then, I'm terrified I'm failing Malik. That working halfway across the world makes me a bad sister. That he'll graduate and realize I chose money over being there for him. The words spilled out like a confession. I call him every week, and every week I hear how he's handling everything alone, and I wonder if I made the worst mistake of my life. You're giving him a future. That's not failure. But at what cost? Her voice cracked. I missed his 18th birthday, his high school graduation, every important moment, because I'm here burning myself out in a hospital, sending money like that's the same as showing up. Jaewon was quiet for a long moment. Then, when my father died, I inherited everything. The business, the responsibility, the enemies. I was 25. My brother was 22, and he hated me for it. Hated that our father chose me. He stared at his hands. I could have shared the power. Could have made him a partner. Instead, I pushed him out to protect what was mine. 3 months later, He tried to have me killed. Juan, I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. He's alive, somewhere in Japan, building his own organization. And every day, I wonder if things could have been different, if I'd chosen connection over control. His eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. You didn't fail your brother, Layla. You sacrificed for him. There's a difference. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the stars emerged, they walked the grounds together. His hand brushed hers once, twice, then finally held it. Neither of them pulled away. And for the first time since boarding that plane, Layla felt something other than fear, something warm and dangerous and completely, terrifyingly real. 3 weeks later, Layla stood in her tiny Jersey City apartment, staring at the pile of mail Malik had left on the counter. Bills, student loan statements, a postcard from Megan that said, "Never traveling with you again," in all caps. Life had returned to normal with the brutal efficiency of a slap. Joanne had put her on a commercial flight back to Seoul after 5 days in Paris. 5 days that felt like a fever dream. Long conversations over wine, stolen moments in the garden, and one night where he'd kissed her against the estate's stone wall like she was oxygen and he was drowning. Then reality returned. "I can't keep you safe if this continues," he'd said at the airport, his jaw tight. "My enemies are circling. The war I mentioned, it started. People I trusted are dead. And you," he'd touched her face, gentle despite the violence in his eyes. "You're the only weakness I've allowed myself in a decade. That makes you a target." She'd flown home, finished her exchange program, returned to Jersey and her old ICU job and the life she'd built for necessity rather than choice. But she thought about him constantly. The way he'd listen when she talked about Malik. The way he'd shown her the parts of himself no one else saw. Not the Mafia king, but the man who cooked his grandmother's recipes and admitted he was lonely. Malik came home from class and found her crying over coffee. "What's wrong?" He dropped his backpack, concern flooding his face. "Nothing. Just tired." "Layla." He sat across from her, suddenly looking older than 18. "You've been different since you got back. Distant. What happened in Seoul?" "I met someone. And he's complicated. Dangerous. Completely wrong for me." She laughed bitterly. "And I can't stop thinking about him. So call him." "It's not that simple. It never is." Malik squeezed her hand. "But you spend your whole life taking care of me. Maybe it's time you let yourself have something you want, even if it's complicated." That evening, Layla was pulling a double shift at the hospital when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Look outside." Her heart stopped. She moved to the break room window overlooking the parking lot and saw him. Jae-won Cho, leaning against a black car, hands in his pockets, looking up at her floor like he had all the time in the world. No guards. No entourage. Just him. She ran. Down 6 flights of stairs because the elevator was too slow, through the emergency exit, across the parking lot in her scrubs and sneakers. He caught her when she reached him, his arms solid and real. "You came," she breathed. "I ended the war, eliminated the threats, restructured everything." His voice was rough against her ear. "And then I got on a plane because the most powerful man in Korea is apparently useless without a nurse who boards the wrong flights." "You're insane." "Probably." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes soft in a way she'd never seen. "But I'm yours, if you'll have me." Layla kissed him, right there in the hospital parking lot, in front of night shift nurses and EMTs and anyone else watching. Because some mistakes aren't mistakes at all. Some mistakes are destiny wearing a disguise. And this dangerous, impossible man had crossed the world to prove that even Mafia kings aren't immune to love. If you believe love can break through any barrier, even the walls built by the most dangerous men, drop a comment saying love conquers all. Only the cold-hearted and cynics won't. Should we continue Layla and Jae-won's story? There's so much more to explore. Meeting Malik, navigating their impossible relationship between two worlds, the enemies who won't stay gone, and what happens when a Mafia king tries to live a normal life in New Jersey. Spoiler, it doesn't go well. Comment part 2 if you want to see what happens next. Let me know what you'd most want to see. Malik meeting Jae-won for the first time, Jae-won trying and hilariously failing at normal American life, old enemies coming for revenge, a trip back to Korea where Layla enters his world fully. Drop your vote below, and if you're team Jae-won and Layla, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss part 2. Only people who don't believe in epic love stories won't subscribe.